So thank you, Sally, for agreeing to have this time to talk together. And the idea was to have a little bit of time to just chat about these 50 years. It's a huge number, 50,
Mhm.
isn't it? It's important. And just to see to have your views on what has happened in these 50 years, what's your place in all this, and how you see the future. Well, this is mainly what we wanted to talk with you.
Okay.
Eh, are you? I know that you have just come back from very short break, and that's always complicated for us to have the time to live and to breathe, because our work is always very demanding and so on. So my first thinking about my first thought about all this was how do you think your journey, your trip in all these years with INPP has shaped your professional and your personal life also?
Oh gosh. I think I can safely say it has consumed the last 37 years of my life, mostly in positive ways. And if I go right back to when I was a small child, I think all of my life, if there was something I couldn't understand or didn't understand, I have always wanted to know why. Um, and if I could discover why something was the way it was, then the next thing I wanted to know was how. And if I wasn't sure about the how, it was what if. And I think those three questions have motivated me, followed me through all these years with INPP, really. It's been like a lifelong quest, which INPP seemed to come up with some of the answers. So if I look back at INPP itself, I was so lucky to come in at the time that I did. It was still quite early in INPP's sort of development, but it was late enough for the basic structure to have been put in place. So those foundations of a screening device, a reliable assessment tool, exercises, and evaluation were all there in their infancy, I would say. There was a lot of development that still needed to be done. Um, and so it gave me a framework that made sense, that I was able to fit into at a particular time in my life. And I think also I was lucky in as far as in the 1980s, it was still possible to come into something like this from a different professional background from the one that I've ended up in. And while that was difficult, it also perhaps supported me with skills to write, to research, and do things which I might not have had if I had started from a purely scientific route.
I see a lot of what you say in many of our lives. That's very nice, because in fact I think what IMPP has given to many of us is a frame, a structure from where to develop, and that's our word,
Yes.
isn't it? Development. So in all these developments, what is the most important thing, the most important significant achievement that you have seen for INPP in in all these years?
I hope the ability to embrace continuity and at the same time, to be able to secure the foundations of what is efficient and reliable and effective, while still looking outwards to see what more could be done. And bearing in mind something that Peter always talked about in his training was the importance of the analysis of failure. you learn nothing or very little from your successes. It just encourages you to go on repeating the same thing over and over again. And I hope what INPP has done is to look at where it's effective and say where are the shortcomings. What is different about the children who don't respond like other children do? What could be done better? And I think that ability to hold on to what is good while looking at, testing out, bringing in the new has probably been one of the greatest strengths of INPP over the years, really. Yes.
I think it's not little, and it is it, it, it is a huge foundation of our clinical practice, and I think that all of us that have had the opportunity to share with Peter in the beginning and with you to share some teaching, some working time, have always got that from all of you, from both of you, and and I hope we will be able to keep it with IMPP for its history. So it's nice. But that's the other word, no? History. The development means time, and 50 years. It's a lot of time. It's alive, and 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 it's the life of an organization and the life of the people who has been around. I mean, um, I think it is impossible to put together everything that we have lived,
Yes.
conferences, supervisions. I have hundreds of images in my mind from the Ruan Orchid, the restaurant in Chester, and the cathedral rooms for some
Mm.
supervisions and courses and so on. So I have a lot of images and his, of all this history, and I can imagine all the ones that you have. Would you be
It's
able?
also interesting you say the 50 years, it's a long time. It is in our lifetime, but when we look at it in the context of evolution, it's nothing. And when we look at our work and how we replicate, or a child replicates its evolutionary history in its physical development in that first year of life, that change in children's development doesn't alter at nearly as a rapid rate as technology and other advances do. And I think one of the great strengths of INPP work and the history of INPP work is that it takes that into account. It looks at that slow process that we all have to go through in childhood to get to standing, walking, speaking, free use of the hands for all those other skills. And it allows a child a chance to repeat bits of that if it needs to. And so the 50 years has been a long time in the development of the method, but is an incredibly short time in terms of what we are actually dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely true. And how do you think, or how, what is the most important milestones you have in mind if we need to see how has IMPP's approach developed in all these 50 years?
I suppose definitions give us a yardstick in a way, in that the first recognition that came in was David and Peter working in a college of education, going into schools and looking at underlying physical factors in children who were underachieving or presenting with specific learning difficulties. And they came up with 3 criteria that seemed to be there in common in these children. Aberrant patterns of motor development, so omission or failure to crawl and creep, failure to develop a preferred side of functioning, laterality by 8 years of age, and definite visual perceptual dysfunctions. And those they called organic brain dysfunction, or OBD, which was an incredibly unpopular term because nobody really understood organic. Anything to do with the brain terrified parents, and dysfunction everybody heard as damage. So it wasn't a good description. So that then moved on in the 80s to neurodevelopmental delay, which seemed to be a broader description, but then became too broad because it encompasses so much more than simply what INPP does. It can be auditory processing problems, biochemical factors, the whole umbrella of neurodevelopmental difficulties. And so early in the last 10 years or 15 years, we've moved on to talking about immature neuromotor skills because that seems to more precisely describe what the INPP method screens for, assesses, and measures change as it starts to work with it. So that terminology, I think, sort of sees an evolution of how it's been described, but also there have been changes in how the work is done, of which the probably the most significant in the 1980s was moving on from trying to impose what we'd call higher physical patterns on less mature ones in the hope that by capping them with a higher ability, you would somehow get rid of the primitive reflexes or other dysfunctions underneath. And it was in the 1980s, the time I came in really, that we started to look at could normal human movements be harnessed to help to integrate reflexes if you understood the importance of different types of movement at different stages in development. So there was a big changeover in the 1980s from a 40-minute training program to a 5 to 10-minute reflex stimulation and inhibition program. And then also a realization that the reflexes were not only markers of immaturity, but fulfilled a function in their own right, and in certain cases might even need to be stimulated before to be integrated. So the whole of the intervention program changed in the 1980s and 1990s, moving towards using natural movements rather than constructed movements, and they were found to be much more effective. And then I suppose in the 90s, the recognition that many of the children with neuromotor immaturity also had auditory processing difficulties, that various methods of sound therapies could be useful to be used either before, after, or alongside the INPP program. And we looked into quite a number of those different sound therapies, and all of them have their value and their merits. But because children on the INPP program can regress emotionally or become easily overloaded, the one we selected as being the most suitable alongside the INPP program was Johansson Individualized Auditory Stimulation Training. As I say, it's not the only one. I refer children for other types if the criteria suggest that's what's necessary. But the introduction of other interventions alongside the INPP program, if the criteria of the child suggested that this was the right thing to do. So some children don't need it, but some children need a little bit more. And then an increasing body of research and evidence since 2000 to support the underlying theories that we have always talked about, to show that reflexes do persist in certain populations, so not just in underachievement and specific learning difficulties, but also in children with speech problems, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, autistic spectrum, and so on. That nobody says these are the cause, but they are a feature of many of these disorders. And therefore, if the neuromotor aspects can be improved, you don't necessarily change the diagnosis, but you improve the functioning of that child within it. And there is an increasing body of published research, both done by INPP and independently, to support those connections. So I would say those were probably the biggest landmarks in the last 50 years.
Yeah, yeah. And those have been very, very important moments. And I think that what you stressed to focus in those two issues, both movement as our core field, what we measure and what we treat, and the second is to respect and to follow uh, the the development, the natural development of the child is something that, well, I arrived only some 25, a little bit more than 25 years ago to INPP, and so those two issues were already a part of INPP, and I think that's something that really convinced me and also helped me to put in order many other ideas and many other instruments that were there in the past. So yes, those I agree with you are some very, very, very important moments in the for INPP. But we always speak about development, and development happens with environment, isn't it?
Mhm.
We need environment to produce development, and so the same as INPP was changing was doing this trip, this travel in history, its environment, so the neurodevelopmental field has always changed a lot in the
Mm.
last 50 years, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, the whole area of recognition of neuroplasticity, that we have so many more neurons, brain cells than we are ever going to ever going to use, and it is possible to divert function with specific stimulation away from a damaged area or a dysfunctional area to one that can take over that function. And that, I think, that theory underlies so much of what the INPP intervention does. Um, and then I think one of the exciting things for now and the future is the developments in neuroimaging. To date, we have only really been able to measure the dysfunctions that we're working with a series of external, outwardly visible tests. They don't show us what is actually happening in the brain. They give us a clue, they give us markers. And equally, perhaps in the future, to be able to see in terms of brain functioning what has changed or is changing when those reflexes become integrated. I think this is a really exciting thing for the future.
I think this is absolutely our homework. So yes, I get I get that. I get that. I agree. I absolutely agree, and I think it's really exciting, and I think this is the responsibility of our time, for our generation. Our responsibility is to go and try to fill that part of the picture. So
Yes. To
absolutely.
use technology for what it's really designed for, I think, which is to see and to measure and to support. So not just in terms of brain imaging, but other markers of physiological change. So in the adults that we see where there is anxiety, we know there is hyperarousal in response to various sensory stimuli. There was one small piece of work that was done with EEG, which showed that the arousal levels started to go down as certain reflexes became inhibited. And these are the sort of areas where I think much more work needs to be done in the future.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this is our homework. This is what we need to focus and to do. And well, mm, let me tell you, thinking about all these 50 years and our conference in October, it's very exciting. It's very happy, but I know that it means also that you are doing some steps forward also in your in your personal life, and so thinking about that before speaking about the future, uh, what what do you think is your footprint? What is what you have left in INPPs in INPP with your work?
I hope to have taught this generation and future generations to look behind and beyond the symptoms, to see the symptoms simply as the clothes somebody wears on the day they arrive. Actually, what is really interesting is what's underneath, and trying to Peter always used to say we are both detectives and engineer or mechanics in our job. The wonderful thing that the method has done is to give us a tool or a model to try and understand what does lie beneath, and then an indicator as to what could be done that is likely to be effective for this person. And I only ever still see probably the IMP method as a model for doing that. And when I see families still, that's the model that I use to look at the physical side. But probably just as much of my time spent with the family is spent looking at the repercussions of those physical things, how they've affected the emotional dynamics within the family, how the child is reacting, what can be done, and to be an advocate for that family. That's what I always see as my role. And the INPP method has enabled me to be an advocate in a very particular area of human function.
Wow. Well, I think you that's very nice, and that talks about your role in the clinic, and also what you have taught to us. I think one thing which I cannot take away from you is your respect to science, and your strong belief and your strong need to stay with science, and to do all this what you have told us in a very um, scientific way. Well, you can be a very good detective, and you can use uh, your own intelligence, and your own intuitions, but to follow science, and to stay and to stick in what can be measured, and I think that's something that has been very important, and you have stressed in all your books, and every time you have done a presentation or something like that. So I think that's also something that you we will keep we will keep that in from you, probably, hopefully. So, and so this is 50 years, and we hope we won't break anything, and so we will have at least another 50. How do you see the future of IMPP? How do you see the next steps, or the future? What's your vision?
I think what I always hoped for was that the method would become a tool that was adopted for and recognized for use in other professions. So primarily medicine, but also education and psychology and rehabilitation as well. So at the moment, it's still just a little bit outside of mainstream. But my belief is that it belongs firmly within those disciplines, provided that the training of the method is the same whoever takes it up, so that you have a basic standard and a level of knowledge. But I think it could be so much more widely applied to those in need, that there wouldn't, in theory, be the wait that families often have of 2 to 3 years before they get the referral through to occupational therapy, from occupational therapy to a pediatrician, from a pediatrician maybe to a psychologist. And those are wasted years. And in terms of children aged 6 to 9 years of age, those years can never be brought back. They can never really be made up if they are lost for too long, because nobody has bothered to look and see what is blocking this otherwise intelligent child from being able to develop the educational skills they need to support everything that's been done in the classroom and in social interaction and so on. So I would like to see if it's possible, and I don't think it will be in my day, but I hope it will be in yours, that it is adopted as a useful tool. Adhering to the standards already put in place, I think, which we've talked about. Um, and I suppose for those who are working from now, the message I would like to pass on is whatever else is going on in your life, in your day, in your understanding of the method, when a child or a family is with you, that child should be the total focus of your attention. That is what you're there for. And I know at times, I mean, I must have assessed and reviewed thousands of children over 37 years. And when I used to go up to London to run a follow-up clinic in London once a month, I would see 7 children on the hour over 2 days and then get the train home. And I had to develop a mantra. And that mantra was, okay, I've done all these tests 13 times before, but this is the first time I'm doing it for this family now. And I think that maintaining that key relationship with whoever is with you is actually crucial to being good at what you do. Being listening to the language of the patient and being sensitive to what is tolerable and important to them. The tools that we have are useful because they go behind the language of what someone will necessarily tell you verbally. The body tells its own story. But also be sensitive to what they can cope with. Don't rigidly apply what you have learned in a way that allows no room for those individual differences. Those individual differences are really important. To be guided by practice and willing to question and evaluate what you're doing. If it doesn't work with one child, don't just go on imposing the same over and over again. Look at why, look at what else needs to be done, and be open to change. I suppose those would be the things that I hope people will take forward into the future.
Whoa. Whoa. That's a lot, and I think that's really useful as advice. I think for every INPP licensate in everywhere in the world, uh, in our clinical work with families. So that's absolutely great, and I get that for myself and for all our licensees. But that reminds me also another part of the story because you have done a lot of work. You probably cannot count how many kids you have worked with, but you have also worked with therapists because one part of INPP's development in all these years has been teaching to other professionals what what you had understood and what you were developing, and it has grown with time. And now, as we know, now there are about 700, a little bit more than 700 licentiates working with IMPP method together. And that has been a great work because you can multiply how many kids you have seen
Mm.
by numbers, and I think that is that is something that you need to keep with you. I think when one of us decide to steal some of that precious time that you were telling from the kids to teach somebody else, I understand. I can understand in the very beginning the doubts for Peter and for you about teaching. I remember when you came to Madrid, and I know all that means in terms of clinical um, changes, what you change in your clinical life. But But you have changed not only the life of a lot of kids, but also of a lot of therapists. And now that's something that has spread
Well,
everywhere in
you are
the
doing the
world.
same. You are now doing the same.
Yes, in the world. So now that there's that family, you have been the head of this family for many years, family that has grown somehow uh, just naturally without big rules or whatever. And now that family needs to be kept together and needs to go to the following steps. So what are uh, um, your advice for people who will follow you in that responsibility? I feel it like a responsibility.
I think I'd probably say, like, being a parent, it's make the minimum of rules that are necessary for your household to run quietly. Well, not quietly, but to run. Stick to the rules that are important, but don't be overzealous about creating more and more layers of organization, because then you stifle the very thing that you have been nurturing.
That's important, and that's something that we'll we are trying. We'll try to our best to to keep to keep that way.
And humor,
Yeah,
retain a sense of humor is incredibly important.
a glass of wine helps sometimes.
Yes.
That, but yes, absolutely. That has also been part of the history,
Yes.
and it will be. I mean, well, I can I can remember a lot of Peter's jokes, and we all have tried
And I
to.
think that's something for teaching and for practice as well, is how important the stories and the humor are. I can't remember, there was something on the radio just last week about teaching people a load of facts. And if they are sat down and shown things on a screen, that's right, it was bullet points on a screen. If they were shown so many bullet points on the screen, if they're lucky, they remember 2 out of 10. If someone has told a story, they remember the story. And the story is the lead in to the facts that you need to remember. Um, so that storytelling is also important.
Hmm, great. So, in the next few months, you have already begun to pass on some responsibilities and so on. In the next few months, you will be uh, going forward with that process. What do you think is you will miss the most
Oh,
from?
that's easy. The people. That's totally easy. All the wonderful colleagues, some of whom I have worked alongside for 34, 35 years, and we are still friends. That's an amazing tribute to them, I think, actually, that we have. The word journey is overused in modern times, but it has been a journey. And I think you and your son have walked the St. James, part of the St. James's Way, haven't you?
Yeah,
They talk about in any pilgrimage, it's not just the landscape that changes along the way. The people and you change with it. And that shared experience, excitement of ideas. I can remember a conference, Chester conference, many years ago, with Professor Matti Bergström sitting at our table for the conference dinner. And he'd given his presentation. No, it was his presentation the next morning. He said, I sat at dinner last night and I saw young people alongside me with stars in their eyes, as I used to be as a young man. And he said it was wonderful to see all that, not just idealism, but enthusiasm for what is coming next. And that is something really, really precious, which I've been lucky enough to share with so many people over the years. And also the families I see who, they go and we don't hear from them again because we are a part of the problem. And when the problem is over, we are not relevant anymore. And that's how it should be. But the processes of problem solving that have gone into that relationship, I shall miss that interaction, although I still have my own practice, a sort of scale down practice for the next couple of years. That is also um, something which gives back to you in your professional capacity. It isn't only a one-way giving process.
Yeah. And if it's not too personal, what's what's your idea? What are you planning for your future?
Probably rather like falling into INPP by accident. I think I have spent so long constantly trying to catch up with the call of what I need to do next that maybe I need to just take a little bit of time to listen to what I can do. So I hope I'll continue to be useful in this area when people want me to contribute to things. But whether there is any way I can translate some of what I've learned into other areas of voluntary work, I will have a look at that when the autumn arrives. Um, I don't know whether my grandchildren still want me to spend any more time with them, but the idea is I would like to
As,
spend a little more time with them.
as they grow, it's complicated,
Yes,
isn't it?
and to have the time to actually be in the time of the things that I do rather than rushing always on to what needs to be done next. But I will need to do something. I can't sit here and
No?
just be retired. No,
Don't
that won't happen.
don't worry. Don't worry. I think you will not have so much time
Mhm.
to get bored. So the first thing we are looking forward very um, curious and happy is your contribution in our next conference
Mm.
in Chester in October, where we will be together with all that IMPP family and people who come from outside the family to can I say to party?
Yes.
Scientifically, is it not very? It's not very scientific, but to to celebrate together all these all these 50 years of history of neurodevelopment. I think IMPP um, has a role in what has been the development of neurodevelopmental field uh, in all these 50 years, and I think we can celebrate that together and can use that as a starting point for the following.
I think it is a landmark really for the celebration of what has been, but also what is going to be the future. And we have, as you know, in place a developing structure for the future, which comprises those of you who have been appointed trainers of the method in other countries for a number of years. And so you have a huge breadth and depth of experience between you and behind you in your individual sort of professional fields to take on the responsibility for the content of education, training, and standards in the future internationally, so that there will be a recognizable international standard that can continue to grow and develop in the hands of those of you that know it best.
Well, yes, that's a lovely gift, uh, and every gift has a great responsibility, and I feel it like that. So my hope is we will be able to continue what you have developed in all these years. But I am sure we are going to get and we're going to have your help and your support in a way or another. So so do not worry, we will call you for everything.
But also some of the fantastic speakers you've got on the program as well for this conference. You know, it embraces totally what I talked about, continuity and change. So you have Dr. Harold Levinson, who was really one of the first people to moot the vestibular cerebellar theory of dyslexia, phobic disorders, ADHD, before INPP even really got started. And his underlying theory has married with what INPP does for so many years, and he will be contributing at this conference as he was at the very beginning. And also those who've come into the Ken over the years, perhaps not so well known as part of INPP, but alongside it is Michael Lazarev's work in developing musical programs for the developing fetus from um, third trimester of pregnancy up to 7 years of age, and how that knowledge can be used to provide play programs for parents and children all over the world. And those are just two of the, many people who are not just from the past, but those who are looking at developing things in the future, adaptations of the INPP method alongside them. So I think it is an amazing eclectic program, which is very rare in the field of scientific conferences because often they focus so much on their own area of speciality. And these conferences historically have started from our own area of speciality, but invited those from all sorts of related fields to come in and contribute and share so that we learn from each other. And so I hope it's going to be a wonderful occasion.
Yes, I absolutely agree with you. We cannot say all the names and everything, but I'm also very excited about this year's possibility to for some IMPP licentiates to present their work because we are already doing science in our consultants rooms and it's really very exciting to see how a lot of licentiates are doing more questions and trying to find answers using the instruments and measuring. And so I think that's also a great part of the balance, using
Yes, the launch pad.
another of our keywords, no, the balance between great science and the work with the method, everyday's work with the
Well,
method.
how clinical practice contributes to science for the future. And that's it. You need the theory, but you also need the practice to, to acquire the evidence to take it forward and make it solid.
Yeah. Absolutely, but you will be opening that, and and so and so and so I will leave you to to prepare the your conference presentation because you know that we all are waiting for it, and we will be very happy to hear. Thank you so much for your time. I know it's always complicated, but I think it was nice to have this
That's
talk
been a pleasure.
to share with all other licentiates and people who is curious to know a little bit more about what has been these 50 years of IMPP. Thank you so much, Sally. See you very
Thank you.
soon.
Bye bye.